Good morning, everybody out there in TV land. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Basse Update. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the festival and some things coming up. And special guest today is Don Matthews. Welcome, Don.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Good, good. Don's a participant, a citizen down at Point Basse, and we're going to visit a little bit. Tom Bramer, usual person that's here most of the time, is up north inspecting some Boy Scout camps or something like that now. So we're going to cover a little bit, the little backdrop, a little bit about the festival and what you thought of it. And by the way, you know, unbeknownst till I thought about it this morning, we got the most popular man right here with us today, Don Matthews, because he was making ice cream, and I can tell you he was the most popular man there because everybody was there like they were like bees around honey. When he was getting done with a batch, you could see these kids coming from all directions and adults.
Yeah, it was a real family affair. I got the feeling that you know, the kids were really having a lot of fun, and it was really neat because many of these children were from other Point Basse festival families, and they were in period clothes, you know, and they were playing in the sawdust and playing, you know, and around under barefoot, and it's like, wow, this is really like the old times, you know.
It's like what it should be.
Yes.
You know, and what we try to portray, though sometimes we have a harder time doing it, is that we've got young people and children and adults and older people, and you know, we don't want everybody to think that it's all gray hair there, because in the Wakely's day, there would have been a mixture of ages and people there, so that's what we're trying to portray. But you normally, on an event, are probably in the woodworker shop, the carpenter shop, and that by custom is your occupation anyway.
Yes, I portray a sawyer, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically someone who saws, although it's changed as people started getting their own equipment, you know, and the sawyer started to turn into, just like many people in the early days when people had to do more than one thing, you know, it wasn't so specialized as in the more civilized areas. Right. So the sawyer did a lot of things, you know, cut firewood and be a agent for sawed lumber and many things.
Yeah, because we think of sometimes even a blacksmith, but a blacksmith in the Wakely's day had to do almost everything. It was like a millwright or something. He had to be able to do and fix most everything anybody had a problem with it breaking down. If it wasn't wood, he had to fix it. It was made out of metal. He had to work on it and fix it.
Yes.
Keep it going. So. And
the same thing with but a sawyer, and that's where a sawyer changed, because a sawyer then, he wasn't a cabinet maker joiner, because back then you call a cabinet maker a joiner, not a cabinet maker. And he really didn't get into that, but that was about the only thing that was the difference between a modern day carpenter and a sawyer. You know? So
Don, how did you get, I mean, your occupation has been from carpentry and that sort of thing over the years. Is that why you kind of naturally evolved towards that position? And you know, we really didn't have a carpenter there or sawyer, so that was kind of a position open, and you started volunteering, and so it was kind of a natural for you, I suppose, to go that direction.
Yes, I was a carpenter all my life, really. I did only maybe a year and a half as a laborer until I started my state apprenticeship as a carpenter, and then I worked many jobs throughout the state and in other states, and you meet a lot of different people, because every job is like a different collection of people, and then when that project is over, you know, sometimes it only lasts 6 months, sometimes a year and a half. I think the longest project I ever did was like 32 months, and that was kind of unusual. But you meet a little group every time, and you meet a lot of different people that do so many interesting things, and I met a lot of people that were into old tools and recreating carpentry, and especially sawing wood and making things out of rough wood. And it was interesting. And also too, I do enjoy history. And so between the love of working with wood and the love of history, it was just a good match.
Yeah, and kind of melded it together. And then certainly you're not a person that hasn't been on stage, because you've worked with community theater, in different productions, just Thor just recently, and have enjoyed that over the years. The Silver Foxes, you've done a lot of those different things over the years. So we're not really acting per se, but we are a little bit, somewhat, if you want to think about it, really in terms of it, we're portraying somebody that we aren't, so isn't that acting? I would think that's somewhat acting.
It feels a lot like acting.
Yes.
Because you have to be always cognizant of what you're saying, because you're in that period.
Right.
Because I mean,
if they asked you who president was, you'd have to have a name there.
Yes.
That's why sometimes I think for us at Point Basse is what us citizens should do is each year pick a year we're going to portray. We got from 1840 to 1860 to portray. We should pick like 1840 one year, 1841. Then we'd know who was president. So if somebody came up and asked you, what do you think about the presidential election? Well, it was so-and-so, because it would be a different, which would really put you in the groove for being in that era.
Yes, that'd be a really great thing to do for Whodunnit, because I know many times I get in kind of a difficult situation when someone asks me a question and it's, wow, I can't really answer that very well.
That was a good segue anyway, Don, because we got Whodunnit coming up on July 20th, which is Sunday from 2 to 5. And this year, Luke Conkle, who's been our writer and director, and Father Seamus and that sort of thing, is the USS Manadoo. And it's supposedly a secret weapon to end the war. So it's some of the principals are at the Wakely area in the inn, and there's some Confederate general that has been in the area, and so there's lots of intrigue going on, and this secret weapon was supposed to be going down the Wisconsin, down the Mississippi, and end the war because it was going to be so devastating or something. So that's kind of you, of course, are the Sawyer, Andrew Crystal, and you're portraying that, and you've done that, I think, probably for 3-4 years now.
I don't believe I've ever been a different character for Whodunnit.
Right. And then I portray Robert Wakely, and Bev Ross does Mary Wakely, and we've got a couple of Joni and Tom Wolfe do the Sergeant Olivier and his wife, and we got a cast of characters, about 20 people.
Wow, that's a good sized casting.
I've got some to fill yet, and I've talked to community theater people. I've talked to Steve Martin and Mike Edgren, and hopefully they can get involved, because they do such a great job during the October, the Spirit Walk.
Yes.
They do such a great job and really get in. And these gentlemen, especially I know Steve, he's got that national award and all that. It's like falling off a log for these guys. I mean, they do this all the time, and they're very good at it.
They do such a good job in their clothing. Yeah. I know Steve especially. Wow, he just dresses right up to the 10th, and it's like, it's like coming right out of...
I said, Steve, I got Sheriff Buck that you could be, because Luke and I talk about it, and I says, who are your principals? So there's usually about 6 principals where most of the information is, or most of the intrigue would be towards them. So it's Sheriff Buck, and it's there's a Birch Feather, a Chippewa Indian. So I said you could play Birch Feather, and there's a couple other positions, but I said these are some of the major characters. And usually for our own people, our own citizens of Point Basse, we have a number of them that feel fairly comfortable, but I hate to put somebody that's used to just interpreting into too much of a position as one of the major characters all the time, and so I'd like to put some of those community theater people into that position. So
yeah, it's a good idea, because you have to be used to some improv, and that's in the theater. That's how we learn a lot, is going through improv nights, where we put ourselves on the spot so we have to think and think quickly.
You have to think on your feet.
Yes, yeah. And I'm not particularly good at that, so I need a lot of practice.
Yeah. Well, and that's basically what Whodunnit is. We each have information about 2 or 3 paragraphs about each of us, and we have 2 or 3 paragraphs about everyone else, so we can find the linkings, how we're linked to each other, and if we're good friends or if we're enemies or whatever. And we know that, but that's all we know. Anything beyond that is basically improv. And all we have to abide by is that we cannot lie. We can cast aspersions or try to put somebody on a different path or something, but we can't outright lie. If they ask us, do you know this or don't know this?
Misdirect them.
Yes.
To where,
because it's surprising the questions they come up. Some of these people really sit down with extra time, and they sit down and they pose their questions, and then they come back sometimes 2 or 3 times. I've had them, I think probably you've had them too.
Yes.
They come back to the house to you out in the 3-bay shed and they're asking, well, they talk to somebody else. Now you said this. Now they're trying to catch you in between here or see what they can flesh something out. So
It seems like there's two different sets of people that come to it. Some people come some early, and like you say, they're taking notes and they're really trying to get into this mystery. And I think that those people have a lot more fun doing it that way. Other people come and just kind of go through the motions a little bit, and I think the people that really get into it, and it's just like playing a game of Clue or a murder mystery in a theater. It's much more fun if you really get into it.
I always tell people that are planning on coming in, we'll probably take pre-orders for tickets, and then we'll have the booklets available, so maybe a week in advance, so they could actually start studying it early. I said your best bet is to come early and sit down for 20 minutes and go through that whole booklet and formulate some questions, and then start going out. Don't go out as you're reading it, oh, are you Andrew Crystal, or are you Rob? Sometimes they don't even know who the person is they're talking to.
Yes.
If you can formulate, because you're given a map that maps everybody out where everybody's located, so you know where to go. But it's important, I think, for people to take the time to read it, formulate their questions, and then go out. I think some of them that just run out right away, those sometimes are the ones that come around 2 or 3 times because they're finding out something else that they didn't know because they didn't read it.
I find people, oh, you're Andrew Crystal, and then they're reading the paragraph as they're in front of me.
They're reading it all out to you, emphasizing what you already know. So.
Yes.
But we've got a little flesh out, and so I think it'll be a great one. I give all the credit in the world to Luke Conkle and the people that have done this before, because they've got to write the story kind of backwards and forwards, because you kind of write it to know your ending, but you also got to write it so that you leave enough direction to go towards that ending. So it's kind of people must really love that to write. I don't think I could have come anywhere near that. I don't think I have a complex enough brain to think up all these scenarios and all this sort of thing. But when Luke reads that off, usually he's got about 5 or 6 pages. It's like phenomenal. It's all these things bouncing back and forth and that sort of thing. And I kind of told Luke a little bit, he tends to make them really hard. I said, let's make it a little easier. I says, look, we want to get 6 or 8 or a dozen people with the correct answer, so that everybody doesn't go away and say, well, that was so hard, I don't even know who it was or something.
Yeah, I know the first one, and it's like the man killed the person by mistake. Yeah. It's like he hardly knew he did it himself.
That was our old friend Pierre Charette.
Yeah.
He was out in the evening, he mistook somebody
because he was drunk. Yeah, it's like, so I mean, that was pretty hard to figure that one out.
That was a hard one to figure out without a little more clues in there somewhere.
But then, was it last year? I think 3 people figured it out, right? Or 4 maybe even.
Yeah, and that's a good amount of people. If you can get 3 or 4 or up to a dozen or so, if everybody figures out, then we know it's too easy.
Yes.
If it'd be myself writing it, I think everybody either figured out or they wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about. But so he's working on this. He graduated from school now. He's working in Green Bay, but we've had some contact. His family's back in Wisconsin Rapids, so.
He sure did a good job at Spirit Walk too, and that's really I really am enjoying Spirit Walk more every year.
And Spirit Walk is almost one of those extemporaneous, almost ad-libbing a little bit. You've got a story, but as you and I both know, Don, down at the site, if we're giving a little presentation to people, I don't think I've ever given one the same twice. There's something that comes in the back of my mind. I forgot that last time. I throw it in this time, and then I leave out something else, and it's phenomenal.
Yes.
How many times that your story changes, all with facts, but some are forgotten one time and they're remembered the next time,
or something happens that
Well, I was just reading a little bit about, in 1830 and 1837, there were some major recessions in America.
Yes.
Well, don't you think that maybe that's one of the reasons that Wakely went west? There was a major recession. The recession probably isn't affecting the West, it's affecting the colonies that have been settled for 50 or 100 years already. It's the ones that in the West, that's where the opportunity is, because it's pretty wide open. So that's probably why Wakely's came out to Wisconsin in the first place from upstate New York, because of the recessions. But if you don't know that background, you never know that, why would they come here? Why wouldn't they just stay and be comfortable in New York, upstate New York, Lake George?
I've often wondered if the government gave some kind of incentives, or even the territories did, but I have never really run across any. Have you ever run across any incentives other than the homestead thing?
The only thing I saw was the homesteads, but as far as I know, Wisconsin and Minnesota, I think, weren't settled much with homestead. It was more the western, the prairie states, or that sort of thing. And when the Wakely came, it's okay to talk about it now, but Wakely was actually not legally sitting on that land when he came, because he came in 1837, and there really wasn't a treaty that covered that part of the Wisconsin River to like 1838 or something, and so he was kind of squatting on that land, hoping nobody would come along, in the U.S. Army in that case, because they stopped and closed up a couple of shingle mills, and there's some things like that that were illegal. So he was kind of squatting, and so at the time, but then I think he probably purchased the land because he had sat on it for so long, and when it went from a territory to a state, then he could buy the land or whatever. So
I guess I always thought it was part of that 3 miles, but that on each side of the river, but that was farther
I think it
up
went
north.
from Port Edwards north, and I don't know if it ever came down to Nakusa. So.
Oh, okay.
So my understanding was from Port Edwards to like Wausau or something,
Above.
3 mile stretch on each side of the river. I think the treaty of, what was it, 1836 treaty, or
That's why that Stevenson came up to Big Bull Falls, because that treaty was just signed, right?
And they'd opened up that territory, and so he could fell the trees and send them to his sawmill and then float them down the river in lumber rafts and sell it in St. Louis or wherever down the prairie states.
And Wakely was connected with Stevens too, right?
Right.
Was he a protege or just a friend, or?
Well, they were both from upstate New York, though I don't think they ever met each other in upstate New York, but I think in a trip to St. Louis, I think Wakely met Stevens.
Oh, that's right. There was something about that in
I
that.
think
Yeah.
they talked about maybe some ideal place to set up a sawmill, and I think Wakely had been in this area maybe a year or two before him, so then Stevens came up with Wakely as a guide to show him where the best spots would be, and I think Wakely helped him set up his lumber mill and a few other things and got him settled in a little bit. So I think Wakely was kind of an entrepreneur, a middleman, kind of setting up people, trying to get people settled in the area. So, and then of course Stevens came up, and Stevens Landing, and then eventually Stevens Point was named after George Stevens. So,
And Wakely wanted to go on his own, so he came down here and.
Yeah, and he was down here before, and I think I don't think Wakely ever became wealthy by those standards in those days. It was completely different than today. I imagine if you had maybe $50,000 worth of land or assets, you probably were wealthy in those days. But he wasn't wealthy by those standards, but he had an inn, he had a house, and he had a village of some sorts there that was recognized by the U.S. Postal Office and given a postmastership from 1845 to 1850. So he had enough of a settlement there that the post office recognized it, because they sent a petition in twice to the U.S. Postal Department to get a post office at Point Basse. And we were also on that Portage to Plover land route, so it came right along through the Wakely's land there, so that was kind of a natural for that. And I think, the Civil War, I think, kind of did it in for him, because his boys, 2 of his boys were in the Civil War, and when him and Moses Strong were trying to harness the water power on the east side of the river, in Point Basse there, to create a mill, or just to harness the water power, or a flour mill, or whatever it was, they couldn't get it done because they lacked the manpower, because most everybody was serving in the Civil War at that time. 2 of his boys, in fact, were there, and so he didn't have it. And then about that time, things kind of switched a little bit, and then things started to happen on the other side of the river. Maybe somebody was more well-endowed financially or something, that they could get the job done. But Moses Strong, who was kind of a developer from Madison, came up, and from that area, Mineral Point, and he came up and tried to help him with that. So,
like a lot of things in history, the potential was there, but it just never.
Well, I always tell everybody, especially the kids from Nakusa, I said, if Wakely's vision had succeeded, we'd be in Nakusa, probably the ghost town, and we'd be interpreting Nakusa
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
And Point Basse maybe would be the city now. You know, maybe they would have do reversed roles, but you know, the railroad went on the west side of the river, the water power is harnessed on the west side, so that spelled the end of Wakely's dream for Point Basse to become more than just a settlement, to become a village and that sort of thing. So, you know, all those twists and turns of life and society and the eras that change, it's like you say, you have to be a good student of history because you got to kind of understand where all this is coming from. You know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was really amazed. Well, I've just been working at Wakely for 3 years, and since I retired, and I was amazed at how many buildings and how many interesting things you did have at the site.
Yeah.
You know.
I think at the time you came, we were probably just getting done with the barn, probably
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
And then you were instrumental in working with us on the warehouse, which, other than folks, we kind of 95% got the gaps between the logs taken care of. So now we're probably ready for chinking within the next, probably after Whodunnit. I think we won't get at it before then. So sometime in early August, probably we'll get at it before the. I'd like to dedicate it at the Harvest Fair in September because
That works.
we got another building to start, but I really would like to finish one building before I start another one. I don't want 3 projects going. It's kind of like your modern day house builder. They get 3 houses going and they keep everybody a little bit happy, but nobody very happy because they just they work 3 days on that house and then this one kind of complains, where have you guys been? Then they go over and help that guy for 3 days and then they go back again. So I hate to get into that because we've got a lot of time and for us it's kind of a labor of love. So what's the difference if we start in the fall and we just get the foundation in and a few things done and then next spring we start putting up. I think the bunkhouse, which is our next project, I think probably won't be too hard of a project because we're working with all dimensional lumber. In the past we've been working with other buildings we're retrofitting to use for the purpose we're using it.
Yeah.
That's kind of hard.
I was thinking about that the other day, and I was kind of envisioning maybe like a house raising, if we could get enough people together to, you know, concentrate the effort, because it is a Greek revival structure, and you don't really want it left out to the rain too much.
Too long.
So it'd be nice to rough it in,
Right.
get the outside walls and get a
Put
roof.
the roof on.
You know, maybe next year do the siding, but at
Right.
least you wouldn't get all the wood soak through the winter.
And I've had a lot of inquiries, just you mentioned that, Don, about house raising. I've had a lot of inquiries from people over the years. They say, hey, when you do something, let me know, because they're kind of interested in this old type of building and how they did it and stuff. And they're, you know, even if it's more just lending a hand, there's people out there that are interested in it. I think it's kind of quirks the interest of a lot of people.
And with the dimensional lumber, it is more conventional. You know, it's so there could be a lot of people. You know, you could have people cutting studs and putting a wall up, and while other people worked on the outside boards. You know, and it could be very similar to a regular house construction.
And we could do it too is, and we have done it somewhat, is we could do it without electricity. We could say we're going to saw this by hand, and we're going to not use any power equipment, and that'd be kind of fun too. Just to
definitely.
go back just to the hammers and nails and saws, and maybe we got to do a little chiseling, you know, and that sort of thing. I mean, that'd be. It's maybe one of our last buildings. Maybe it'd be kind of fun to really do this one by kind of like hand, almost like the Wakeleys. Other than we got modern saws, but they're hand saws still.
I often thought, because I have the capability, I don't have cameras like this, but
Right.
I can video things. I do have some video of putting the warehouse together, and I was often wondering if we could have like a viewing area after we get the bunkhouse done, where you could set up something where people during the festivals and things could go in there and watch a video of what, you know, things.
And we could almost do in the bunkhouse, because now that we've kind of electrified a bunch of our buildings, though it's hidden, you don't see it, that would be a sort of thing a person could have just a little screen in there and just push it and get a 30-minute thing if people were interested in seeing, just on a rolling tape, so it would just keep replaying itself.
And you could even start with some history of the Wakely.
Some basic history,
Yeah.
and then bring them up, and then say this was our latest project, and it was done without power tools, and this just gives you a snippet of how it was put together, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
And then, what is it? Not quite 20, but very close to 20 classes of school students come through every year too, right?
Right.
And you could almost have a video for them to watch. It would be.
I would think it would be good for them, maybe they watch it actually in the classroom. And
Oh,
they
sure.
come out,
Yeah.
maybe the week before, so that brings some questions in their mind that when they come out there. And then they also have a little perspective of what they're seeing. Because the first time they come out there, if they've never been there before, this is like, is this like Disney or what is this?
Yes.
Because it's so foreign to them from what they see.
And like
So
I've seen that, I saw that on the film. I gotta make sure I see it in person.
Right,
I like
right.
like the cabin. I'm just amazed at the trapper's cabin.
Yeah.
That's really. I look around the state, and probably the only thing comparable is Old World, Wisconsin.
Right.
That looks really authentic.
Yeah,
You know?
they did a nice job on that. So I just want to remind you folks, we're getting short on time here, that the Whodunnit is Sunday, July 20th from 2 to 5 p.m. If you like mystery, you like theater, this is the sort of thing for you. Come on out and find out who the person was. We have a full reading at the end of it to let you know who did it, and it'll unfold. Luke Conkle is our writer that unfolds it all for us, and Don and I will both be there, and amongst about 18 other people. And it's $4 for adults, $2 for students. We're right at the Wakely site. We do this. We invite you out. Great time. Don, I thank you for being with us today. And
Pleasure.
yeah, thanks, Don. Thanks, everyone, for listening.